Welcome to Living Well with MS, the podcast from Overcoming MS for people with multiple sclerosis interested in making healthy lifestyle choices. I'm your host, Jeff Alex. Thank you for joining us for this new episode. I hope it makes you feel more informed and inspired about living a full life with MS. Don't forget to check out our show notes for more information and useful links. You can find these on our website at overcomingms.org/podcast. If you enjoy the show, please spread the word about us on your social media channels. That's the kind of viral effect we can all smile about. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Now, without further ado, on with the show. The holidays are upon us, which for many of us means time spent with family eating a smorgasbord of delicious foods. This highly anticipated seasonal ritual sometimes leads to unintended consequences. Expanded waistlines and hefty price tags for all the holiday meals you've had to stock up ingredients for. That's why we're pleased to welcome Karen Lee, the healthy cooking doyenne of the Sensitive Foodie Kitchen, to help us navigate holiday eating in a healthy way that won't bust the bank. Welcome to Living Well with MS, Karen, and it's great to have you here. But before we dig into the main course, so to speak, could you tell us a bit about yourself, your experience with MS, and how you got into the healthy food game?
Yes, certainly. Hi, Jeff, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. What can I tell you about myself? Well, my background professionally is I used to be an intensive care nurse, but I'm also a naturopathic nutritionist as well. And I've always really enjoyed food, loved all sorts of food, but not all food had loved me. So I had discovered that I had food intolerances, which basically was all my favourite foods. So I was intolerant to dairy and yeast, so all cake and bread and cheese and all those lovely things. So I wanted to feel better though, so I started to explore using different ingredients to have all the favourite foods that I had. So I'd actually already transferred to eating a whole food plant-based diet, which I discovered whilst I was living in India, which is another story altogether. But back in the UK, back at work, I suddenly lost the sight of my eye, which was an interesting experience, and then subsequently got diagnosed with MS. So that was in 2016. So I was already doing the food part of the OMS plan. Unfortunately, one of my colleagues had already told me about the program because her husband followed it. And of course, as we know with OMS, it's not just the food. So the food's my favourite bit, but it's all how we manage our lives as well, which wasn't managing it particularly well. So I started following OMS straight away and carried on developing and looking into eating amazingly tasty food that also happens to be good for your health. And that's what I do now. Continue making food that I can enjoy.
And so what is the Sensitive Foodie Kitchen?
So the Sensitive Foodie Kitchen is... I started off as a sensitive foodie. So when I first started making changes, I started blogging about it. And this was back in 2012 when there wasn't that much around. But when I came back from India, I decided I wanted to start teaching other people how to do this. So I started off doing cooking demos and classes in my kitchen, hence why it turned into the Sensitive Foodie Kitchen. And so whilst some people think it's a catering company, it's just, a normal kitchen where you make whole food, plant-based food. And then from there, it's just developed into, I run courses and do cooking classes and everything online now.
Okay, so we're talking about the holiday season. So what are the main challenges you see people coming across when they're trying to follow the OMS diet while wanting to indulge in delicious holiday food?
Yeah, well, I personally, I see this as there's three different challenges when it comes to this. The one is energy levels, because a lot of it just depends upon how you're feeling. One of them is that feeling of missing out. because there's a lot of tradition to do with, holiday celebrations, and you have your favorite dishes, and they tend to be full of fats and sugars and all sorts of things. And you want to be able to enjoy it as well, but it's not fair if you feel like you're missing out. And then the other one is actually other people, because it can be really difficult. Their attitude towards what they think you can do or what you should be eating, or they get over anxious about making sure that you are eating what you need to be eating. So those can be quite difficult, and they can get on top of you. So I think a lot of it is really just knowing what it is that you want to do and having a plan. I always say that to people, but I'm actually one of the worst planners. But even if the plan is in your head about, the sorts of things that you want to eat, and sort of thinking ahead about, okay, well, I haven't got much energy every day, so maybe I can make a few things or get someone else to make a few things. It's just really thinking about what this event is, whether or not it's over a few days or just one big meal. Like I say, just really thinking about what it is that you want to eat and how you're going to achieve that.
Yeah, I think that, I'm thinking now, because a lot of things can be frozen we're recording this the end of November, end of November, and I'm thinking I make a vegan Wellington, and I think, okay, I'll make 2 vegan Wellingtons. I'll freeze them because they freeze really well and easily, and then that'll be my sort of main dish. And then because I've got like a week off one, so there'll be like a couple of meals like where I can have that, and then there's a few other things, and I know that they're quite easily freezable, and so I can do them over a number of weeks and put them in the freezer, and then that's sort of much easier on the day then.
Yes, absolutely.
You talked about energy, and you mentioned on your courses and website about managing energy. So what do you mean by that? What's the concept of managing energy, and how does that apply practically to this sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I think, as with a lot of people with MS really struggle with fatigue, and just only having so many things that they can do in a day. And again, I tend to judge people about how I am, but I want to still be able to do everything. And some of the times it's just a matter of stepping back and saying, okay, I want to do all these things, but actually I also want to enjoy myself. So, and enjoying yourself needs as much energy as doing all these things as well. So a lot of it is just being really realistic and saying, all right, at the minute I know I can, if I spend this time making this and having it ready, then, as you say, all you've got to do is reheat it, have it done, and then I'm going to have time to celebrate and socialize, because that's exhausting as well. Talking to people, having children around who are really excited, it can be quite tiring. And whilst everybody tends to have you have a big meal at lunchtime maybe, and then everyone can have a legitimate snooze in the afternoon, it's not always possible to be able to rest when you might need to rest, and then you lose that enjoyment, and then you start feeling like you're missing out as well. So, one of the things that we do, and now more because of my children are a bit old, so they're in their early 20s, so they they've got their own things that they want to do when it comes to our Christmas celebration, and obviously this can apply to any celebration, is that we have our main meal on Christmas Eve. So we do all the food and everything, and then on Christmas Day we have all the leftovers and the reheated. So we've got time to open the presents and to have a couple of drinks, and and have a much more relaxing day, rather than rushing around and preparing this food and this food. So it's just really working out what works for you, so that your energy is at a level where you can just enjoy yourself enjoy yourself and have a lovely family time, whatever that celebration is.
Yeah, there's the spoon concept or spoon theory comes up a lot. You get so many spoons a day, and everything has a cost in spoons.
It does.
And it does, and you find that I think with MS, you sort of reset overnight, don't you? You kind of like you have a night's sleep, and you've got back your amount of spoons in this. I think it was originally someone just trying to explain it as a concept, and they had some spoons around. And they just said, "Well, imagine you had this many spoons, but actually." Cooking dinner, that's going to cost you some of those, and doing that, and then so by the time you get to the evening and you want to actually meet up with some friends, you've got no spoons left, then you're going to be absolutely shattered. And that's so true. And I sort of think that if I'm doing something later that I want to do that is enjoyable, then maybe I'm not doing as much exercise during the day, because if I really work out hard exercising, I know I'm not going to have much energy left, and so or timing when I do exercise is another thing. So I don't exercise first thing in the morning anymore, which I used to do, because I know that maybe I won't have, something will come up later on and I'll just be shattered. So now I kind of think, okay, well, I'll make sure I've got everything I need to do during the day, and then I can exercise. And if I've got nothing left, I've just got to slump on the sofa and I'm fine.
No, absolutely. The concept is great. And also you can... sometimes if you give yourself permission to take that rest in the day or to do something in the day, you can replenish your spoons as well. So it could be that if you're busy, you've done a few things, if you actually then either go and have a power nap or do a meditation, I find just switching my brain off for 15 minutes or so, because it's a very busy place in there, and that can rejuvenate me. And sometimes it's actually going out for a walk. I found that in lockdown because I'm working from home all the time, and sometimes I just need to get away from the computer and I can feel exhausted. But if the sun's shining, if I go out for a 15, 20-minute gentle walk, it's great. It's rejuvenated. So it is. It's. I think energy is something that is quite personal as well, and how you revamp that. And that goes, the same with all these celebrations. It's just again coming back to the planning and really just thinking about what it is that's going to work for you, and not being afraid to ask for help. I think that's really important, and particularly if you are the one who is kind of expected to be the main chef for all of this, which is fine, and you may want to do some or all of it, but equally there's no shame or harm, or actually it's really good to get other people involved in it as well. So if you want to, then just dish out jobs to people. And it might not be that you want everybody in your kitchen all at the same time, because that can also be tiring. But send somebody off with the Brussels sprouts to peel, for example, and send somebody out, give someone else the potatoes, and you can always send them off into a different room. But don't be afraid to ask for help.
And you're a big fan of plant-based alternatives to traditional festive food.
Yes.
So could you tell us some of your main course favourites and where you can find recipes for those sort of things?
Yes. So, I personally don't go for the bought processed fake meats. So I like to eat whole foods. So one of our sort of the standard options is a nut roast, which sounds a bit boring, but you can always tart it up a little bit by putting some extra ingredients in the middle, whether or not it's a cranberry sauce or some garlic mushrooms or greens or whatever it is. You can make it a bit fancy pants. But also I like to use like traditional seasonal flavors. So like I might use I do a chestnut and sweet potato with some sort of winter spices in that, and then wrap it up in some phyllo pastry to make a swirl. So it looks posh, but it's not that difficult to make, and you get that nice mixture of textures and flavors in there as well. Those you can make, or you can find the recipes for these on my website. I'm also, there's a lentil and mushroom loaf as well, because obviously some people can't eat nuts, or choose not to eat nuts if they want to avoid too much fat. So there's a lentil and mushroom one, and with mushrooms, it seems to be much easier to find a nice selection of them now. So you can find like shiitake mushrooms or mixed woodland mushrooms, or even just rehydrate some dried ones, so that you get these lovely different flavors and textures in there. And the other one that we do sometimes is making a vegan haggis. So we discovered
like the least OMS friendly food stuff.
Yeah,
surely.
I know it is, but it's not. We discovered this. We were up in Edinburgh a few years ago, and there's a vegetarian vegan restaurant up there called Henderson's, which I think is quite well established. And they had this haggis, but it's made from lentils and oats and things, so it's a really nice rich flavor, so you could just have it as it is, but also again you can then wrap it up in some phyllo pastry to make a nice little haggis parcel, or make I'd make pastry with either, you can add in some little bit of olive oil or a nut butter or tahini, something like that, so you are replacing the fat or the lard or whatever it is in pastry with a whole alternative, or a slightly healthier one if you're using olive oil. Because this is a problem if you want to buy things in the shops. So many of the seasonal celebration foods are really full of saturated fat, pastry in particular. No, I used to love puff pastry. But even, although you can find it without dairy in, it's loads and loads of different refined oils, and you just look at the level of saturated fat, and it's just like,
yeah,
that one tiny bit of puff pastry is about the excess.
But you said about phyllo
saturated
pastry,
fat.
and I find that because phyllo pastry, in my mind, is impossible to make yourself because it's so thin. Yeah. But most phyllo pastry, when you look at it in shop bought, it has very few ingredients, and it's really just flour and water and not much else at all. So
absolutely.
I think if people are avoiding gluten, that might be harder. But certainly, if you're okay with gluten, you can actually just use sheets of phyllo pastry and then just put olive oil between them. And you don't even necessarily need to use olive oil either. You can use like soya milk.
Okay. So that if you don't want to even, bake with olive oil at all in the oven, which I know with regards to the temperatures, it's okay, but some people like to completely avoid it. Mm-hmm. You can just use soya milk. It browns it. It might not be quite as crispy, but it still works.
But that can make a really good parcel, can't it? Sort of like a pie, so I do it with Wellington. You were saying like doing parcels, and so that was a real game changer for me, that you could sort of make like a phyllo pastry.
Yeah.
Wrap. And there's one the OMS cookbook. I did one of a Cornish pasty, and so you can make a sort of short crust pastry. It is possible to do it. It's not quite as good, but it's pretty good. So you can get different ingredients, different types of pastries, which are pretty close.
Yeah, which is why I tend to use, if I'm making something like that, I tend to use nut butters. Mm-hmm. So you can get some really amazing 100% nut butters made from walnut or from hazelnut, or you can use tahini, and they provide a slight richer flavour to it and tend to hold it together a little bit more. Mm-hmm. It's certainly something that I've taught people on my cooking classes. Like I say, I do these Zoom cooking classes. So we've made pastry, different versions of pastry quite a lot. And it works with gluten-free flour that way as well. So people who are gluten-free don't have to miss out completely. It's quite difficult to manipulate sometimes. And it might not win any photogenic prizes, but it works and it tastes good, and they're the two key things as far as I'm concerned.
And how about side dishes and sauces for a meal?
Yeah, well, I mean, with vegetables, I always think it's actually, especially if you're cooking, you're the only one eating the way that you eat and everybody else is having something else. I'm quite fortunate in my house. Everybody just eats whatever I give them, so I don't have to worry about that. But with like with potatoes, roast potatoes, you can cook them completely oil free as long as you cook the potatoes beforehand so that they go not mushy, but they're properly cooked, so they fluff up and then they brown beautifully in the oven. And again, with the vegetables, as long as you can just steam them, cook them, you roast them. Most veggies can be roasted without any oil whatsoever, as long as you keep turning them, and they need a little bit of water on them beforehand so that heat just helps to caramelize them. Or you can put in some non-stick baking paper in the tray, and then that just helps to things to cook a little bit. But again, if you want to use a little bit of oil, then do so. I just tend to spray it with some olive oil, and then use, I don't tend to use like a metal baking tray. Then I use more of a ceramic dish and just massage massage it so that there's a little bit covering it. So one of the favourites here is leeks in white sauce, which is a bit of a challenge making that. But you can, what I found is if you can mix some flour and a little bit of olive oil together to kind of make a roux, but then put the dairy-free milk in the pan and then add that in, so you're not actually got the fat from the oil directly on the heat. You're immediately whisking it in, and it works so that you're avoiding that direct heat, so that it just, so because that's important, obviously, as you don't want the fat directly on the heat in the pan, and that does work. It's a bit of you have to do a lot of whisking, so you need some energy for that, or give that to somebody else. So you can make a white sauce that way. But I also tend to use like a cashew cream with things quite a bit. So just soak a few cashew nuts, then blend it with some water. And even if it's, it can seem a little bit runny to start off with, but once you put it in the pan and start heating it, it thickens really, really quickly. So that's another alternative way of doing that, so you can still have your leeks in white sauce. That's very traditional. I don't know if any other family likes it as much as mine do, but it's a way of doing it.
No, there are some things, and I think it's just traditions, isn't it? So we've have a red cabbage. We've got to have the red cabbage, and that has to be ridiculous. The more complicated it is, the happier everyone is. Got to have different fruits and like things in it. And but yeah, and I think those traditions are important as well. That's kind of what kids remember about Christmas.
And also when red cabbage is just brilliant at this time of year, because it's you can add all those lovely flavors and spices into it as well, but it's also going to give you benefits as well. And that's the thing about what I try to get across to people with any of my recipes, is the fact that the enjoyment and the taste, it's all really, really important, but it also all comes with benefits as well. So everything that you're eating, it tastes good, but also is going to be doing you good. So it's all about making sure it's not doing any harm at the same time, but it's giving you extra benefits. Mm-hmm. And so red cabbage with all that amazing purple phytonutrients in there, that's your body loves them. So that's brilliant.
And so a lot of these things are unusual recipes. I mean, that's kind of the idea, is we're eating something that's a bit special, a bit different. And so a lot of the things you wouldn't normally have in your pantry, the ingredients for these. So is there any tips that you have to make healthy and delicious food without spending a fortune on all these extra ingredients?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, none of the most of my ingredients I use is pretty normal food. I mean, or normal ingredients, because I'm very aware of there's a lot of recipes out there that will use, something rare and imported. So there's certain things like tahini, for example, not everybody has. But if you like hummus, and you don't want, it can be quite difficult to buy hummus, and it's actually much cheaper to make your own. So having a jar of tahini in the fridge is quite an important ingredient to have. So if if you've got that, then you can use that for your pastry, for example, or if you've got a nut butter that you like. I mean, both those things are more expensive, but they don't have to be, shoved at the back of the cupboard. They can be used for everyday things. But also, I would say that if there's something that is slightly more expensive, you can often source them at the cheaper supermarkets now, which is it's really great. So look at those places, or go to a refill shop, for example. There are places where they are more affordable than going to Waitrose, for example, and buying, a tiny packet of walnuts for £3, £3.50 or something like that. You can get much better. So it's just a matter of looking for places going to places which stock these items at a slightly
and I
better
found our
price.
local supermarket, even in the same supermarket, you can buy a tiny packet of almonds, or you can buy a massive bag of almonds. Basically, it's like, so there's one which is sort of an ingredients aisle, and there's one which is a snack aisle. And it's like, but they're the same thing, but you're charging sort of 5 times the price per volume for that than you are for that.
Yeah.
And sometimes finding those sort of, and a lot of them, if there's a sort of like a South Asian area or those sort of specialist areas, and so our one has lots of different areas. There's for Polish people, there's one for South Asian area, there's sort of, different regional areas, I think specifically for people from those areas to find their ingredients. But they'll have massive bags of like chickpeas was one you mentioned doing hummus. So tahini is like, actually we always have tahini because we make hummus all the time. But just big bags of dried chickpeas, which are really, really cheap, and so much cheaper than buying them in cans. And because it's just there's a different audience there that even though it's the same supermarket, which is slightly bizarre.
Absolutely. And that was the other one I was going to say, actually. If you've got like a local Asian store as well. So although I live in quite a small town, we've got quite a large Asian community just because of the offices that we've got here. So it's great because we've got a couple of stores that have imported lots of traditional Indian ingredients, which are so much cheaper. So you can go to the supermarkets. I use chickpea flour a lot in things because it's a great egg alternative and it thickens. In the supermarket, if they sell it as chickpea flour, it costs a fortune. You go to the store and you buy a packet of gram flour or besan, it comes by different names, and it's at least half the price. So it's just knowing. It takes a little bit of investigation, I think, to start off with when you do cook this way, and knowing what you can find in your local area.
Yeah.
But if you find, where things are, and there's other people, if like in your OMS circle, for example, if there's people living up, then tell them, and then they can know where they're from as well. But on the veggie side as well, just quickly, again, the cheaper supermarkets often have vegetables which are really tasty and unusual that other places might not stock. So like Brussels sprout tops, for example, which are really amazing green leaves, which are really tasty, but usually get thrown away or fed to the animals. So you can find cheaper vegetables or go by veg book scheme, local markets, things like that. So there are places that you can get good bargains without spending too much money, but also know what you're going to do with it when it's left over, because you don't want to throw a load of food away for so many different reasons. So yeah, do know what you're going to do with it if you've got extra food or extra ingredients.
So we've talked a lot about sort of main courses. What about desserts? So how can you make an OMS friendly dessert, again, without being too expensive and making it compliant?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, on my website, there's like how to because you go and buy mincemeat, and traditionally mincemeat's got suet, vegetable suet in, which is really fatty. So it's when you make it yourself, yes, you have to go and buy the ingredients, but getting some mixed dried fruit is much cheaper than, you know, a jar of mincemeat. So they're much easier, and a lot of it is just making things without the saturated fats. Again, I've got a recipe for a traditional Christmas cake, which is mainly soaked dried fruit and your flour of choice and some spices. So none of that it costs a lot. There's a Yule log recipe as well. So again, this is some people won't know what a Yule log is, but it's a very traditional sort of British chocolate log. Looks like a bit of a tree, but it's a chocolate Swiss roll, and it's lovely. But obviously, you think, well, how can I do that OMS friendly? But it is possible. You can, if you use egg whites, it's like an egg white with sponge. But if you don't, then you can use aquafaba, which is the brine saved from chickpeas, tin of chickpeas, as long as it's unsalted, and make this sponge. And then I do a sweet potato chocolate frosting. So make sure that you've got the lowest sort of fat cacao powder that you can find, steam some sweet potatoes, blend it together with a little bit of maple syrup, and it's incredibly chocolatey. For some, again, your taste buds are changed on OMS anyway. But and you can create your own Yule log, which not only that you can eat and everybody else can eat as well. So if you want to share it, obviously. So there are options. So it seems like a lot of hard work, but apart from the Yule log, everything can be frozen. So go back to what we were saying at the beginning. So a couple of years ago, I did a video for OMS to show how to make OMS-friendly mince pies with the tahini pastry, and they freeze really well. In fact, I found some in my freezer the other day. I'd forgotten about them. So from last year, so you can make a batch and then just put them in a container, put them in the freezer, and then just take them out as and when you want them. Mm-hmm. So it's easy, really, and not too expensive.
And another big favourite in my household is Baileys, and I'm sure there's a generic name for Baileys, but sort of whiskey based
Irish liqueur.
Irish cream liqueur.
They have creamy. That's it. That's what we have to call
Irish
it.
cream liqueur. They do have their own vegan version now, but it's quite hard to get hold of. There's a thing called Baileys Almond, which I found a few years ago in America, and then they got in trouble because it's not actually vegan, because it's got honey in it, I think, which is not technically vegan because of bees make it. I think they've changed it now, and I think it is fully vegan, but it's not easy to get hold of. It's certainly not available in my supermarket. So apparently you have some clever ways of making an OMS-friendly version.
Yes.
And I make my own as well, so I'll see if I can how our ones compare.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, I love Baileys, I have to say, and for it's every year when we came to our Christmas celebrations, I would sulk because they're all tucking into their Baileys, and I'm so that's then I decided. So the thing is with Baileys is that they have a secret recipe, really, so you don't really know what's in it. So mine was just really, really simple. It's just a mixture of I use oat cream. You can use other dairy-free creams, but I think oat cream works quite well. And it's just a little bit of cacao powder and some maple syrup, and then obviously some Irish whiskey in there, because that's the bit that you want, really. So it's actually really, really simple. Does it taste like Baileys? Well, it tastes more like Baileys than the almond one, because the almond to me is such an overpowering flavour. I didn't like it.
Yeah, and
personally.
And I think they've tried to make it a bit different, maybe from normal Baileys, because they use vanilla essence as well. And
oh yeah, vanilla. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I've done a batch this year. So your oat cream you can get in the UK. Certainly, there's a leading brand of oat milk, which I think, it's called Oatly. I'm guessing you buy the same ones, cartons of Oatly cream.
Yes,
I'm sure you probably
just
can get
check because I'm not sure if it's still the case, but their organic cream used to have palm oil in it. I think it was. But the black carton, the normal one, didn't, and so
that's a weird one, isn't it? You think you're doing better by going organic, and actually not necessarily.
Still always check the label.
Yeah. Spend a lot of time checking labels now. So I go with Oatly cream, not 100% actually. Just use some oat milk as well, and whiskey, obviously. And then I go with like 1 shot of espresso coffee, some cacao powder, some maple syrup. I do put some vanilla essence. I didn't have any when I made some. My daughter, she's got massively into cooking all these things, and so she'd actually she puts back empty bottles, which is, this is off topic, but infuriating habit of children to put back empty bottles in cupboards so you don't know that they're empty, and then you don't replace them. But anyway, I thought, Bailey's Almond, I'll try it with almond extract, which I had some of, and that didn't work, just as a tip, because it floats, and it just completely separates and sits on top, and nothing I could do would get it to mix in properly. But yeah, next batch we'll be back to traditional. But it is, I mean, my wife doesn't. She said, it's not as nice as Bailey's, but it's like, well, I'm not going to drink Bailey's, so I'm either going with nothing or this, and I really like it. And actually, the best fun is in the experimenting, making it, because you just and so you just try it and say, would it be maybe a little bit more cacao powder, or should it be a bit sweeter?
Definitely have to fiddle around to your taste. You see, because I mean, I don't like coffee.
Right.
I've tried, but I just don't like the flavour. So I don't put espresso in it, but I know some people do. It's getting it to how it works for you. And if other people don't like it, then great.
Yeah, exactly. And actually you've got your own personal Baileys, just for you, which is brilliant.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If they don't like it and they're not plant-based or vegan, then they can have the other Baileys and leave it to you.
So you've given us some amazing advice on this episode for making healthy holiday food that won't drain your budget too much. And I understand that you teach many of these techniques on your courses. So could you tell us a bit more about how they could get involved in the courses if they want to learn a bit more?
Yeah, sure. So just need to come and have a look at my website, which is www.thesensitivefoodiekitchen.com. And there you'll find lots of recipes anyway up on the blog. And because a lot of people in the UK are coming up to holiday season, I've actually got a separate section which I've labelled Christmas recipes, but you could use them for any winter celebration, so that you can go straight to them. But the courses have got their own special page on there, so you can have a look and see what there is. And at the minute, I'm actually doing a few live cooking classes leading up to Christmas on a Saturday. It's something I started doing in lockdown. And not everybody on there who comes to the cooking classes follow OMS, because there's other people that use this way of eating to manage all sorts of health problems or just because they like it. But a lot of people are OMSers who come along, and we have great fun, and it's a bit chaotic, but it's fun. It's all done on Zoom. And then in the new year, I will start doing the Saturday afternoon cooking classes as well. So it's twice a month. So you can see it all on there. And then on the courses, at the minute, I've got one course and there's cooking videos in there. So it's quite good if people are new to whole food plant-based eating. So it covers all sorts of information about the food and health, basically, but you get lots of recipes and stuff. So, and then there's a new introductory cooking course coming up. I filmed it, but I haven't edited it yet. So So basically just on the website and just see, there's just lots of resources on there.
So as a final point, could you tell us what's your absolute favourite holiday meal from starter to main course to dessert?
So a starter for this time of year, I like to have something sort of quite crisp and fresh as a starter. So something like orange and fennel salad, that type of thing, with some pomegranate seeds and maybe toasted nuts on that. So like something really crisp. And then the mains, well, I really like the sweet potato and chestnut swirls because they've got cranberry and everything in it as well, with a load of roast veggies, and often the veggies feature much more than anything else on my plate. And then dessert, I love for Christmas. I love Christmas pudding. It's just goes back to my childhood, really, setting it on fire and having it with a bit of dairy-free cream on the side. So it's all very traditional, but it's enjoyable.
So on that,
and some wine,
absolutely.
Obviously.
On that note, thank you, Karen, for sharing your culinary expertise with the OMS community. Make sure you check out the show notes of this episode for tons of links to delicious recipes, including one for an OMS-friendly Yule log that's not available online but exclusively available in our show notes. And make sure you visit Karen's website, the Sensitive Foodie Kitchen. There's some amazing content there, and you can find that link and many others in the show notes, so please have a look. Our next episode will be the last until 2022, so join us for our coffee break number 26 and meet OMSer Pat Feller from San Diego, California, and hope you can tune in.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Living Well with MS. Please check out this episode's show notes at overcomingms.org/podcast. You'll find all sorts of useful links and bonus information there. Do you have questions about this episode or ideas about future ones? Email us at podcast@overcomingms.org. We'd love to hear from you. You can also subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. Living Well with MS is kindly supported by a grant from the Happy Charitable Trust. If you'd like to support the Overcoming MS charity and help keep our podcast advertising free, you can donate online at overcomingms.org/donate. Thank you for your support. Living Well with MS is produced by Overcoming MS, the world's leading multiple sclerosis healthy lifestyle charity. We are here to help inform, support and empower everyone affected by MS. To find out more and subscribe to our e-newsletter, please visit our website at overcomingms.org. Thanks again for tuning in, and see you next time.